Hello, my American Studies 340 students. This is Professor Donald Earl Collins, looking kind of haggard and scraggly on the Thursday before next week's start to the fall 2020 semester. I just wanted to give you a brief update about where things stand and my expectations for week one, since I have gotten an email for at least two of you in the past few weeks wondering what we're doing the first week and how we're going to do it. So I just want to go over things procedurally and generally for about 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, and hopefully this will help. I'm looking forward to teaching this class. I've been planning this class in some way, shape, or form for about really 5 or 6 years. This class was originally planned to basically be about black education and social justice in the United States, really sort of combining the themes around American education, black experience in America, vis-a-vis education, and all that, and social justice. But we've expanded it to deal with race because, of course, indigenous Americans, Latinx Americans, Asian Americans, other groups have dealt with racial issues. Even white Americans have dealt with racial issues in the sense that, whiteness and whitewashing of English literature and history and those sorts of things. So anyway, but that's the course in a nutshell. You already know what the course is generally about. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't have registered to take it in the first place. So anyway, I anticipated as early as the tail end of the spring semester at AU that we were going to be online specifically this semester. It's not the greatest situation in terms of trying to run seminar-style teaching where I basically go on 20 to 30-minute riffs about different aspects of American education and how racism or inequality plays a role, social control versus social justice versus social equality within the context of education, and so on and so forth. But what I will do to make up for those riffs is to pre-record sort of what would be lecture summaries or riff summaries on the different themes of this course over the course of 10 or 11 weeks. So you will have that starting next week. I will post those the first day of the week. Usually that would be on a Monday, in time for you to watch or listen to prior to our scheduled Zoom meeting times, Thursdays between 5:30 and 6:30. So you will have that. So that's one thing. There's no reason to do lecture notes. This isn't a lecture class. It's a discussion class. It's an upper level course. So the expectation is that students will come in having skimmed or at least done enough of the readings to address a series of guiding questions I'll also provide at the beginning of every week so that you can chew on those while going through your reading. I will probably post some this weekend just so you have an early start. I really want to dive into the readings for week one. And here's why I set up so the first week is actually something you have work to do, in which you have work to do. It's so that you have more time to do your research projects. They're coming up later on in the semester. More time to do the research, more time to write it up, more time to plan presentations, more time if you decide that you want to do a group project with another person for you to work with that other person. I want it to be so that there is more time at the tail end of the semester to deal with the things that you're learning at the beginning of the semester, rather than spreading everything out so that the semester becomes some long slog. And then, of course, once the slog gets toward in November, and all of a sudden you're trying to rush and write a research paper. That's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me. So it's set up a certain way to really help you start the ball rolling. I do not anticipate covering all three readings next Thursday. We're only meeting for an hour, right? And I have to go through introductions and so on and so forth. But I will set up things to make that process easier too. I'm going to set up a part of the page for Blackboard so that you guys can do electronic introductions of each other. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm a junior, blah, 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 that kind of thing, so that you can at least textually and maybe, textually at least communicate with each other before we actually meet on Thursday, so that we're not spending 45 minutes doing introductions and then I have 15 minutes to basically go through the course. I'll also do a short video summary of why it's important to look at syllabus. The syllabus is really important for this course because this is for several reasons. This is a community-based learning course where you are expected as part of doing the course to spend time volunteering and or working for an organization related to the course in order to do your research, ideally, but at the very least in order to learn what organizations are doing around education writ large, whether it happens to actually be a public school or a school district, or, and by the way, education is fairly expansive, so it can include daycare centers that provide pre-K and preschool programs. It can include educational foundations like the Gates Foundation, the Annie E. Casey Foundation in Baltimore. It can include universities and colleges. It can include think tanks like the Brookings Institution, the National Science Foundation, the National Academies, all those places that do work around, K-12 or K-16 education. It can include a number of things. The syllabus goes through that and more. There's that component of the syllabus where I'm ungrading for most of the course, right? I will explain it a little bit more in the summary of the syllabus this weekend / on Monday, but the truth of the matter is that for 70% of the course, 70-80% of the course, you are not receiving a grade. You will get qualitative feedback on your papers. You'll get qualitative feedback on your research project. You'll get qualitative feedback on your reflections. But the only part of the course where you receive a grade throughout the semester will be the discussion component in the course, which is why, it's important to hit the ground running in terms of discussing stuff. So there's that. So I just want you to be aware that these are things that you do need to read up on. I will put a revised syllabus up no later than Monday, August 24th. No, there aren't any major revisions to the syllabus. I'm just tweaking language here and there, correcting a few things that, I left out in terms of what you might watch and how you might watch it, kinds of stuff. The readings haven't changed, deadlines haven't changed, the general rules of the course have not changed. So the syllabus you have is pretty much like 95%, 96% fine. It's just tweaking language, adding a couple of things in terms of suggestions, that kind of thing. So don't worry about that too much. So you can use the syllabus you have to really get into what it is that I'm expecting from you in this course. As for the week 1 readings themselves, ideally you read all 3 by Thursday. That's great, but you do not have to read all 3 by Thursday because we're not going to be able to go through all 3 the first day. That would be, you do need to read them the first week, and you have reflection due at the end of the first week. So your reflection should reflect, for lack of a better way of putting it, at least 2 of those 3 readings, right? These readings are related to the development of what we now understand as K-12 and K-16 education in the United States. And that, with regard to that, there are all kinds of books on American education prior to the 1860s and 70s. In fact, if I were teaching this course strictly as a history of American education or social foundations of education course, which is technically what most of these courses would be like for master's degree teaching students, then the course would start in 1636 with the founding of Harvard. In 1642, the first compulsory schooling in the United States, what would become the United States in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and work your way forward. We're not doing that. We don't have time to do that. And quite frankly, if you're going in the field of teaching, you will end up taking a course like this at some point anyway, called Education Society, History of American Education, History of American Education Reform. There are like 5 different names for that course. That's not the course we're doing. We're doing a course that's oriented toward education, as understanding education is both a form of social control and a form of social mobility. and how the two contradictions become clear when you bring race and racism as components to how American education operates. And that really takes us to the period immediately around the Civil War Reconstruction and emancipation in terms of African Americans, takes us to assimilation with regard to indigenous Americans. It takes us to bilingual education if you're talking about Latinx Americans and to some extent even Asian Americans, and how these different groups have had to deal with the racism embedded in American education, say roughly from the mid-19th century to the present. That's the course. And so the one reading I really want to discuss for day one is the Howard Rabinowitz reading on From Exclusion to Segregation. It's considered one of the groundbreaking essays in both in the field of American education, history of American education, but also in American history in general. You know, he basically looks at the issue of several things. How we get the public schools we have. How do we get public schools become a national thing? Public schools weren't, not all schools are public, right? In the mid to late 19th century. In fact, it's in the mid to late 19th century that we end up developing the system that we now call public schools. Public schools didn't always exist. Private schools did. Christian schools did. Jewish schools did. Some sort of semi-public schooling existed in places like Massachusetts and in New York, but you still had to pay a fee to go to those schools. True public schooling, funded by state tax dollars, whether it's property taxes, income taxes, whatever form of tax, is a relatively modern development. And this essay gets at that with regard to race and emancipation and the work of African Americans around public education. So it gets to all of that, but within the context of both social control and social mobility or social freedom, or however else you want to describe, or social justice even. So I want to talk about that. If we have time, we might even be able to get into the development of historically black colleges and universities at the same time. But that's the first week in a nutshell. I'll spend more time talking about that in my video lecture riff on Monday. So, but that's my expectation for you for the next week or so. Other than that, I just want you, just read that essay if you have time. Skim the other two. Read for the argument. Do not try to read it word for word and memorize everything. We're only going to be on for an hour, 75 minutes tops, and so I don't expect you, even with the guiding questions, to just dive in and just go, I've got 15 different things to say, and be able to, quickly go, wow, I'm going to be the most impressive student that you've ever had. You don't need to do that. You just need to do the reading and, come to me with questions if you have them prior to class. Email me, or if you, have comments, email me those too, or if you want to wait until the Zoom session to do so, then wait till then to do so and ask me your questions and give me your comments and feedback. And we can get started and get off to hopefully a relaxing start in the midst of all of this. And I promise you will not see this much gray and you look this haggard by the time we meet next week.